Good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining. See a lot of familiar faces in the chat already. Let me go ahead and pop up the map while we let people trickle in. And I'll let the music keep running for a little bit while we say good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. See, someone from Australia is here. It's late at night there, so thanks for staying up so late to join the stream. Glad you can make it. And hello to everybody else. Got a couple of fun new things in store today, so looking forward to sharing that all with you. And it is a nice rainy day in Portland here, so I've been enjoying the weather, the change of pace from the summer fires and smoke, which has been nice. Got a little bike ride in this morning on the in a little bit of a sprinkle. It's probably gonna be raining a little more when I head back home after this. So yeah, thanks all for joining. Today I have a couple of updates and always happy to just answer questions from people in the chat. So make sure if you do have a question for me to mention my full name, say @AaronParecki in the chat, and then it shows up nice and orange highlighted on my screen so I won't miss your questions. All right, not a lot of folks from the US today. Maybe everybody else is also enjoying the changing weather. Well, I have a fun update. So I know everybody always asks me how I do the chat comments, which is actually different from what you're seeing on the map right now. This is the special version of that, just for finding locations from the chat and and putting them on the map. But the chat comments feature that I've been using for a while now, I actually made it available for other people to use much more easily now. So I'm going to walk through a bit of how to use that, and I will have a video coming out about that hopefully this week with any luck, if I can get my editing finished on that. But let's go take a look at, speaking of the chat, let's take a look at that before I tell you about that. So I'm going to switch over my Chromecast to back over to the chat window to mirror that. So that is going to be not that button, this button. Let's go cast over the chat into the Chromecast over there. All right, now I can go ahead and show that on the screen. And I made the mistake of resizing my window. Let's try this. There we go. That'll do. All right. So yeah, hi everybody. Let me scroll back through here. There we go. Chat is working. Oops, I didn't do that after my last stream. I made a note to make it not remove the chat when I switch back to the main camera. So maybe I will do that on this stream so you can see how my macros work, which is always fun. It's a good question. How is Companion, Stream Deck, Hyperdeck a safe, stable environment? How about fly-ins to complement the above setup, the best setup? The Companion and Stream Deck kind of work together. That's the buttons with the software that runs the buttons. That has been totally stable for me on a network switch. I do run mine off of a Raspberry Pi because it was taking a lot of CPU on my main computer. So I wanted it to get off of my main computer. Also, it means that it's just sort of permanently set up on my desk now here, and I don't have to worry about switching back and forth between, or making sure the app is open when I'm doing a stream and then closing Companion when I'm not doing a stream, because it just eats CPU all the time. And that's been working very well. And that is all wired and hardwired. Everything's on Ethernet here, and that's been totally fine. As far as graphics go, there's a whole bunch of different options, and you do get, yeah, you do have a lot of options there. I know the program H2R Graphics has been very good for this. And the reason is because it does play well with Companion and everything else, where you can actually start scripting it so that you can create macros, or not macros, you can create buttons on the Stream Deck to actually control graphics in H2R Graphics. That has been, I haven't done too much of that myself because I mostly just use the chat. My graphics are mostly just the chat here in this stream. And I have not been doing a lot of live events lately. Fancy that. So that, I haven't had a lot of experience with that. But I know John, who made H2R Graphics, has been doing stuff recently and has been using it a lot in his own gigs. So take a look at that for sure. Randy says, I have an ATEM ISO. Can the USB-C still be used as a webcam? Teams. Is that Microsoft Teams recognized by the computer? After the buffer fills, the audio stops coming through. The on-air is blinking. A couple different things here. If you're using an ATEM ISO as a webcam, you don't really need the ISO for that, because the only advantage of the ISO is that it records all of the feeds, which it obviously can't do if it's being used as a webcam. As for the on-air blinking, that means the buffer is full, and that buffer is full because it lost the connection to the streaming server. So that is the reason for that, and that is there could be again a number of reasons that it lost its connection. Randy says, not using the ISO for recordings as future use. Yeah, cool. Okay. Let me scroll down because I think I see a bunch of chat about this. Yeah, not using ISO for recordings. From Simon, I wish you could run both Companion and Stream Deck at the same time. I've seen people do it, but I still have no luck running them both together. I assume you mean the Stream Deck software. I use Companion, and it just like in the way I have it set up, it just takes over the whole Stream Deck. So I've never used the Stream Deck software itself. I've also seen people use the Stream Deck software itself, like the one that Elgato ships, and then get companion buttons in there, and I don't know how that works. I have not bothered to try it, again, because I use this connected to a Raspberry Pi. I'm not even running it on my main computer. All right, let me scroll back up here. Do you know a tool that can overlay Facebook Live and Twitter mentions like what you have for YouTube? I believe the best bet for that is going to be a dedicated program that does that. And one of them is called Ecamm Live. And that is something I've just started to try out. I haven't used it too much yet, but I'm planning on actually integrating it into this show pretty soon for some fun graphics work. But once that's streaming to 2 different platforms, it can bring chat in. You'll also find a lot of integrations. If you search for that and add OBS to the search, you'll find tons of stuff because people do that with OBS all the time. All right. Ooh, this is a good one. If you have 2 ATEMs running, they both have to be set to the same frame rate. The other day I had one set to 1080-24 and the other to 1080-60, and I was getting flicker. It's definitely going to be best to match the frame rates on that. They will convert frame rates, like it does convert. It'll convert whatever input it's getting into its native frame rate. So if you've got one feeding into the other, like it'll deal with it, but frame rate conversion is not a perfect thing. It's not an exact science. So it's like there's judgment calls that have to be made everywhere. So I'm just checking mine. It looks like actually my back one, the second one, is actually set to 1080p30, and the main one that's streaming to YouTube is 2997, which is interesting. I didn't realize that. It seems to do fine with that though. I don't see any flickering. When I switch to this wide camera, this is actually from the ATEM in the back. So this is the one at 30 frames a second, and then when I switch back to my main camera, this is 2997, but everything is getting converted to 2997 from that main ATEM. Speaking of ATEMs, let's do that. Let's fix my macro here because that's going to get annoying real fast. So what I've got is my macros in here. Let's see, it's called main camera, and this is the one. What it does is it also, there we go, it also turns off the downstream keyer, which is what's showing the chat. So I'm going to take that out because I actually want to leave the downstream key on because I want to keep the chat when I switch back to that camera. I'm going to save that, go back into here, restore. I am on the right one. Yeah, okay. Restore this, macros only, and poof. Okay, now we're good. Let's try that again. Back to the main camera. Let's show the chat. Now I can go to my wide camera, and I can switch back to my main camera, and it should stay on. Much better. Okay. That's great. Cool, cool. Camille says, if I see your output levels from your mic on your ATEM, you're going into the red, but your sound isn't clipping. What output is possible without clipping? So what I've done, okay, first of all, I'm not an audio expert. So what I've done is just listened for it until it sounds good. So I did some EQ this morning. I did that trick I mentioned where I recorded myself into the camera and then played that back so that I didn't have to hear my own voice while I was doing the EQ. And that worked great. So I've got some EQ on here, and then the dynamics are what's making it not clip. So if you look, I've got this curve which is described by the expander and the compressor, and I actually don't have a limiter on here because if you look at that point, it's just under the top, so it won't ever go above. And most of the time it's gonna be reducing the gain because of the yellow line is above that even straight line there. So I just listened to this until it sounded good, and that's... I know like you're supposed to shoot for -3 to -6 or so with normal voice, which you can see like most of my input is not quite at 6. It's mostly under 6. So I'm actually boosting it a bit so that it's like in the red, but it's riding the red and it sounds fine to me. So I think that's okay. I'm using the compressor so that I don't go above 0. Okay. Here's a good question. Is there a mobile app for controlling the ATEM Mini Pro? Kind of. There is an app called Strata Macros and Strata Light, Strata Everything. And that app is a third-party app made by somebody who developed it to control all sorts of various ATEMs. So the Strata Light app is, it'll give you the sort of like main camera buttons of like camera 1, camera 2, the T-bar, that kind of stuff. Strata Macros is the one that I prefer because I can write macros that do multiple things, and then when I push a button, it'll run a macro and do a bunch of stuff at the same time. And it just gives you a bunch of buttons. Cool. Yeah, so that's a good one. I don't know of any other ones. There's probably other apps, but that's the one I've used. Brian asks, did you do a video on how to set up a companion on the Raspberry Pi or find somebody else's? What model did you use? I'm running it on a 4. That's the one they recommend. I did not find a video about it, but their own instructions were very straightforward. So if you look for companion, where was it? It's on their GitHub page. So here is, yeah, you can see John's videos linked here. It's linked from here in their wiki. They have a whole section here on installing it. And yeah, they say it can be installed on a 3 and a 2, but it's not recommended. The 4 is definitely the one they recommend. But basically, I just went through this. It was like surprisingly straightforward. So assuming that you're familiar with this kind of stuff, which it's not as bad as it looks. It walks you through the whole thing here. So I recommend just reading the official guide. This is a good question. Is it possible to create a macro that fades audio in and out instead of a hard cut without getting into the XML? No, because the way that the macro recording a macro works is actually, yeah, you don't need to get into the XML. I'll tell you how to do it. It's going to be a lot of work. It's actually a lot easier to do it in the XML. So if you go into the macros here, and let's go make a new one called, called fade music in. And okay, we're recording. My music is coming in on this channel, so I'm going to first turn it on and set the volume to infinity. Okay. The problem is that if you do the same type of action when you're recording a macro, it's going to only capture the last version of that. So if you toggle a button on and off, for example, it's just going to keep it in the on state. That's what gets recorded. This also counts as one of those actions. So if you do this, it's only going to keep the last value. The trick is you have to click this add pause. So I'm going to go ahead and add a frame. Then I'm going to move this up. And I'm going to add a frame. I'm going to move this up and add a frame. And now you can see why it would be faster to copy and paste the XML for this, because this is going to take me a while. And eventually, if you do this patiently, you will get to a finished macro. And how much more of this should I do? Are you all bored of me clicking this button over and over again? The music is probably coming up now as well. Yeah, because I've got actual music on this. All right. Cool. Here we go. Almost there. At least you get to listen to some music. And let's take it to... Let's stop there. Okay. Now, we're ready to try it. So I'm going to drop that down, turn it off, and recall and run, fade music in. It worked. So that's how you do it. It's not a pleasant experience. And if you want it to be a slower fade, you can add more than 1 frame of pause or move it less each time. So you can see why I would prefer to just do that in a macro, which I did in mine. So if you look at my start program, this is what I copy and pasted. And I got tired of copying and pasting, so I just stopped there. I did 1 decibel every 2 frames, dropping the music down to -16. That is, yeah, so I was just like, you know, copy, paste, change the value. I could go 14.5 if I wanted to, whatever. I see a good comment in chat here. My fade macro was created in Excel to get the result needed, adding values based on calculated dB drop per second and add pauses. Happy to share. That sounds very cool. I think you should definitely drop a link to that on the forums because that sounds very useful. That would be a great thing to add to the resources category. Go ahead and post that because that sounds hilarious. Very good use of Excel. Excel is amazing. All right. Let me scroll back up. So, okay. We talked about some macros and we talked about, yeah, we talked about some chat stuff. I want to share an update on that. Well, okay, first, how do you get the map? Also, congrats on your verification check mark. I see that in the chat here. The map is something that I wrote, which is not very easy to package up right now because it requires getting API keys from Google, both for YouTube and for Google Maps. And the rate limits that they have by default are so low that I can't publish that app for everybody. So I don't have to go through a bunch of hoops and I don't want to. I could make instructions for you to get your own API keys, but their website is terrible. It is not fun to navigate. It's a long process. And you'll still have rate limits on that. It's enough to do like a stream every now and then, it's fine. But anyway, if you do want to try that, I did publish the code because I'm nice. It's not easy to set up, fair warning. So this is the code if you are curious. And yeah, it tells you how to do it. It tells you how to get the credentials. I don't recommend it. So that said, the chat that I do, like popping up messages here. Oh, funny, I need to restyle that, speaking of. So I found a nice little bug. When there's a link, I need to change the link color to not be black because then that gets keyed out. And it only works because it only shows up because I'm wearing a light colored shirt. That is a new thing that I just finished last week. So I'm doing a video about this. So I'm not going to walk through the whole process, but the good news is it's actually very simple now. Because what I did is I packaged up all that custom CSS and JavaScript in a browser extension. So if you want to use that, if you want to use that in your own streams, all you have to do is install this browser extension. I'll drop a link to this in the chat because I don't think it shows up in search right now because it's so new. But if you click that link and install this, then when you go to a live chat pop-out URL for a video, it'll look like this, which is then how I'm showing this on the screen. So I've got the effect on and you see it on my screen. So that's why there's 2 of them. But it basically just turns your live chat pop out. Oh, and I realize I should be on live chat, not top chat. That was a mistake. So again, this is not perfect. I just ruined my green highlights by clicking that button. This is also not a perfect solution, fair warning, but at least you can use it without having to mess with any code. So you can just install this and it turns your chat window into this. And then there's a bunch of like, you have to do your set up your key and all that to, you know, make this little bottom sliver appear over your video and crop the top. That's what the whole video I'm doing is about. So that is going to come out hopefully Tuesday. If I can finish today, I need to reshoot a couple of lines. And after the stream, I'm going to reshoot a little bit of the video, finish the edit. And that is then going to be a tutorial that's available. And yeah, I'm excited for more people to have this ability to do the chat this way. It's great because it's basically no setup and no API keys, and there's no other server involved. It's just restyling this window. But it does have a couple bugs, like we saw, because as you can see, messages are green that I did not respond to because when I switched to live chat instead of top chat, it, I don't know, reconfigured stuff. So not perfect, but it does work. It does work. Okay, that's where I was. We were talking about macros. So yeah, go check out that browser extension, and I hope people enjoy it. It was not a lot of work to actually make the extension. It was mostly just a matter of copying the code and adding a little bit of framework metadata around it, and then going through Chrome's approval process. But please do give that extension some ratings if you enjoy it, because that'll help more people find it once it gets bumped up a bit. So that will be very helpful for others as well. And if you give it a try right now on this live chat, you can see it in action, which is kind of fun. All right, let's go back to the chat and see other questions we've got here. Yeah, I've gone through the Google Maps API process of my website, and it isn't fun. Yeah, I don't know why it is so cumbersome. Why? I don't know why. Did you ever encounter a problem with YouTube showing not receiving enough video, poor connection? How to solve the problem? The cache is filling up. So I do get that warning all the time, especially in this stream, because when I switch to my computer, the ATEM Mini does a variable bitrate encoding, so it won't waste data if it doesn't need to. And encoding static images is very easy. So that is, it drops the bitrate because less of the image is moving. And then YouTube complains about it not receiving enough data, but it is actually fine. And everything is, there's no problem. It's just YouTube thinks there's a problem because it's getting a low bitrate. That doesn't sound like the problem that you're having, because if the cache is filling up, what that means is your internet connection is too slow. And if your internet connection is too slow, then it will not be able to send up data fast enough, and your cache will fill up because the ATEM is trying to wait for it to be available again. So try dropping your bitrate to something less than whatever you're streaming at currently when you have this problem, and also, or try getting a faster internet connection. Those are the only options there. Can I run Companion and Hyperdeck Simulator on the same Raspberry Pi? I think so. There's no graphical interface for Companion. It's just a web server. It does take a lot of CPU, and I don't know how much CPU the Hyperdeck Simulator takes. But there's probably enough for both, because I feel like my Pi sits around like 30% of CPU just idling there, so that should leave enough room for the Hyperdeck. I just saw my background change. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat and changing my light green. Question here is there a way to record a Hyperdeck quality recording and still see multi-view with the ATEM Mini Pro ISO? Yes, absolutely. So the good news is that the ISO, the individual feeds that it records, like the 4 cameras, the 4 inputs that it records, are recorded at the top quality, no matter what. So no matter what your program is set to, those are recorded at the full like 70 megabits a second. Your program feed is recorded at whatever the quality setting is under streaming. So if you go to the streaming settings, then it'll say like we're recording at, you know, Hyperdeck high or streaming high or whatever. That's what the program feed will be. So if you don't need to stream, if you're just recording, send it to Hyperdeck high. That way you get the highest quality everywhere. If you do need to stream, then that's what's being recorded. Like the streaming quality is what's being recorded. So none of that has anything to do with the HDMI out. So the HDMI out is always free for multi-view. But great question, and thank you for the super chat. Scroll back up here. Oh, there's another one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That was from a question earlier. What question was that? I lost it. I'm sorry, but thank you for the super chat. Yes. The names of the chat participants are black, so they're getting keyed out. It could be either that they are black or that my key is wrong. Let's find out. That was not supposed to sound like Everyday Dad. Sorry, Gary. That is the, let's see, that is the name. The color is not quite black. It's, oh, you can't see that. Let me move this up. The color is 80808, which means that is too dark. What if I make it the same color as this background? 222. So I should make it 222 instead of the other one. Good note. Let me do that. And where is my code? Yeah, that is, the other way to fix this, of course, is to adjust my key. But this is what I should do, is comment, let's see, author color 222. So this is actually a good note. This is one of the things, the first things I want to fix about the extension is right now, nothing is configurable, so it's always going to look like this for people. What I want to do is make it so that you can choose the color of the background there and like change that orange, change the background color for the whole chat bar on the bottom and all that kind of stuff. Somebody came in and at least fixed my CSS to make it configurable up here with CSS variables. So the next step is to move these into a settings screen in the extension. So if any developers want to help me with that, feel free to take that to do and fix that up. I have this is also on my GitHub, so if you want to take a look at the source code, it is wrong window. It is here, and I've got issues on here for move a settings page to a pop-up, add more settings, things like that. So feel free to jump in and help out if you want to. But yes, at the very least, I should ship an update for the author color to be a little bit lighter. And in the meantime, I could adjust my key maybe to do it, to fix it. I don't know if I want to do that though. Let's see. Can I? Nope, not quite. Yeah, not quite. All right. All right, here's another question. I want to make a macro to switch to one camera angle and show the name of the person using H2R graphics. Can I do it with the same key using the Stream Deck? Yes, yes, you can. And that is because you'll need to make the Stream Deck button in Companion do two things. And you can always have it do multiple actions. So you can, where is my Stream Deck configuration? So in the Stream Deck config, when you make a button, you can, for example, like this one, is running commands on both of my ATEMs. So you could also, and then this one's like changing my light color, right? So you can make a button which does a run or set input on program. So change to your camera. And let's see, I don't think I have companion here. Or I don't think I have, I don't have it set up with H2R graphics, but you would set up a second action here for setting the title of H2R graphics and showing it. I don't even have it on this computer yet. Totally possible though. All right. You can use the auto-created resolve project to create a 70 megabit program cut. Oh yeah, good point. So if you are streaming with the ISO, your stream program is recorded at a lower bitrate, so if you're streaming at. If you want to make a higher bitrate version of it, if you load the project that was created in Resolve and then export it, it re-encodes everything. I will say that's the one thing that the auto-created Resolve project is missing right now is it only includes camera cuts and fades, basically. So, and media player. It does not include your keying settings, which is very annoying. So for example, this scene right now, like showing the chat, would not be in the Resolve project because that's created by taking a second camera and then doing a bunch of keying and cropping on it. I don't know why they haven't done that. I'm assuming they're going to ship that soon. Maybe they were just trying to get it out the door really quick a couple months ago. So I'm hoping that comes in the update because I'm annoyed that is not how it works right now. It'd be a good feature request to split the program record quality from the streaming quality. Yeah, the problem is that there's only one encoder in it, and it's encoding the program feed. And then you can set the bitrate of the encoder, which then either will record the disk or push out over the network. They would need to add a second encoder, which is hardware, so I don't think that's coming anytime soon. I tried the Raspberry Pi streaming bridge, but the video from the ATEM Mini is not showing in the monitor. Do you think I have to start all over again? It's probably honestly easiest to just start all over because it's going to take more work to try to debug where things are failing. I would just do it all over from scratch again and see what happens. And if it doesn't work again, then we can dig into it. But feel free to post on the forums and we can try to dig into it because there could be a number of different reasons why it fails. And there's a couple different ways to debug trying to fix it. And thank you for the super chat. Yeah, it could be either that, so the thing is that there's like a few different steps in the chain. So we have to either figure out, is it the ATEM not streaming to the Raspberry Pi, or is it the Raspberry Pi configuration not showing it on the monitor? So if your ATEM is not blinking on air, then that connection to the Raspberry Pi is fine. And if that is blinking on air, we know the problem is between the Raspberry Pi and the ATEM. There's a way we can dig into the Raspberry Pi itself to find out if it's even getting the stream and if it's just a problem with the monitor. There's also 2 HDMI ports on the Raspberry Pi, so that's one quick thing to try is just switch it to the other port because I don't remember how that OMX player decides which one to output over. But if that doesn't give you any clues, then feel free to drop in on the forums and ask there, and we can keep digging into it. All right. And do remember, if you do have a question for me, to make sure to mention my full name so that it shows up on my screen in bright orange, so I won't miss it. What quality are you using for your streams? I'm using streaming high with a gigabit, but the quality is not as crisp and clear as your stream. I am also using streaming high on a gigabit connection. I'm guessing it's probably lighting and camera more than streaming quality. So yeah, this is just on streaming high, 6 megabits. I have a solid connection to YouTube. I haven't seen any stream warnings other than YouTube complaining that my stream is too low when I switch to my computer screen. But yeah, it's my camera is the Lumix G7. I think there's a link to everything down in the description here. The camera is a Lumix G7. I have the 15mm lens on it, and the lighting is very close to me. It's like it's just I can touch it right there, and I don't know. It's been working great. Alan asks, with the ATEM Mini Pro, can I use the streaming bridge to display to local projection while also streaming to YouTube? In order to do that, you would need to stream to the Raspberry Pi and then have the Raspberry Pi output over HDMI for one, and then to YouTube. So the way that in that tutorial that I made, the tutorial will walk you through setting up the equivalent of a stream bridge in a Raspberry Pi. Once you do that, you're set up to do a lot more really cool things with that Raspberry Pi. So after you have that running, then the steps to, for example, restream from the Raspberry Pi back out to YouTube or multiple places, then that's just like config changes, which are just adding a couple of lines to that big config file that we created in that tutorial. So it is something you can do with a Raspberry Pi. You need to, the thing is that you need to catch the stream, because the ATEM will only stream one stream somewhere. So you have to catch that and then do different stuff with it. But the Raspberry Pi would be perfect for that. Caveat, the stream will, the video will be delayed. So the projection in the room will be up to, I would say, somewhere between probably 2 to 5 seconds behind. It's not going to be real time. This is delayed, but only by a few frames, because this is just wireless HDMI delay. But the streaming bridge will be quite a bit more delayed, and the Raspberry Pi. Any recommendations for Resolve Studio gurus? I was using audio plugins with the ATEM video and ran into delay compensation issues. Sorry, I actually don't think I follow. I'm not a Resolve Studio guru at all. I just started using it a couple months ago, so I'm still learning it myself. But the audio plugins, yeah, well, sorry, I don't quite understand the question. I haven't had any trouble picking up my my Resolve or my ATEM videos into Resolve. I've been using the ISO to record a couple of my latest videos, like the tutorial that I'm going to publish soon was recorded on the ISO, but I didn't do any switching in it. I just used it as a way to record multiple feeds at the same time, because I need to record myself through this camera, my computer screen, which I'm seeing on the screen here, and the Chromecast, which I use for the chat. Roger says, I installed the live chat overlay. How do I type into the chat from that interface? It actually hides that text box. It's intentional, because I found that it was too dangerous to have that mixed up in the same interface, because too many things can go wrong if you're trying to do too many different things in the interface. So think of that as just it's a feature. Think of that as just how you're going to show stuff on the screen. And so right now I have on a separate window down here, I have my YouTube control room here, so that I can actually type into the chat down there. But then this is the one I'm using to show on the stream, and that's been working out better, I think. Yeah, typing into from the admin panel. Or if I was like if you're doing it for somebody else's stream and you don't have the admin panel, you would just bring up the video on YouTube, because it doesn't restyle it when you're looking at it on YouTube. It only restyles it in the pop-out. What do you recommend as a video player for looping videos without showing the on-screen menu when looping? I do, in fact, have a recommendation. It's I've used this for conferences before. So when I just want like let's see, HDMI video player. It's called the Mica Spec, and it is just a little box. You put in an SD card, and once you set it up in this mode, as soon as it turns on, it just starts playing whatever's on the SD card. And it does not show any controls or anything, and you don't get any controls. Like, it has a remote, but don't use it. It's terrible. If you just want to loop a video, then that's the easiest thing to do, because it's an HDMI out and you plug it into whatever. So I use that when I'm doing like events where you just want like a 5-minute loop of a bunch of slides of showing like what events are at the conference and the sponsors and all that, and it just seamlessly loops back to the beginning. There's like a half a second like pause when it loops, so it doesn't do seamless, unfortunately, but it doesn't like flicker, and it doesn't have any controls over it. So that is what I would recommend. All right, all right, I want to bring a guest using the streaming bridge, Raspberry Pi. What's the next step? Thanks for watching. I'm very glad to have you here. Using the streaming bridge to bring in a guest is definitely the next step, and the challenge there is working around that delay, because it is going to be delayed. And I actually want to try this out now with bringing a guest into this show, because I suspect that delay is going to be too much for a conversation back and forth, because I'll have to like wait 2 seconds before they would. I'm sorry, other way around. If I'm getting someone's video, I will be seeing it 2 seconds late, and that's just a bit too much to like hold a conversation. But it might work if we have like a FaceTime or other kind of call going on at the same time, not connected into the video system. So think like bringing somebody's high quality video in, but that's not what you're talking to them on. So I'm still thinking that through, and I want to try it out and actually bring guests in here as well. So that is a very good question. Oh, this is a good point. I use the Avenir Next font in your chat. Where'd you get it? After installation, I have something like Times New Roman in the comments. Are you on Windows? Or are you on a Mac? Because I actually don't remember. Yeah, I completely forgot about the font. I think Avenir. So I have Adobe Creative Suite, so I just use that for everything. But I think Avenir is on Google Fonts. Is it? No, it's not. Okay, so I have it because I have Creative Suite installed, where I then installed that font. Okay, that is a good, yeah, Windows. So it's not on Windows. It's not on the Mac by default either, because it's from Adobe Creative Suite. Which means if you have Adobe, you should be able to install that font from Creative Suite. But I'm going to go ahead and right now make a note to use a system font by default, because not everybody has that font available. So I will fix that. Thank you for the bug report. This is a good point. Yes, If you have a Raspberry Pi, then that PlayOutB software, which I think I have a link to in this description as well, that's the one that emulates a Hyperdeck, and that will also do looping video without showing the controls. And of course, the Hyperdeck itself is an option, but that's like $600. So you probably aren't going to do that. Okay, where was I? Scroll back a bit. Okay, along those lines, this is closely related. If I already recorded a podcast episode, but I want to live stream it as if it was live, what is the best way? So if you're talking about live streaming on YouTube, then actually YouTube's scheduled Premiere feature is actually probably a good option. What the Premiere option does is you upload a video to YouTube and set it to Premiere at a time instead of publish at a time. And then at that time, it will show up like a live stream to viewers. So there'll be a chat in it. People won't be able to skip ahead. Like it'll look like a live stream, but it'll be a Premiere. If you're talking about not YouTube, then you need some sort of player to play that into HDMI into your ATEM Mini. And that's where we were just talking about players. So we've got options like the Hyperdeck itself, which is the $600 device, which is definitely overkill for this. We've got the Mica Spec, which is a hardware player that can play off an SD card, or you've got the Raspberry Pi emulator, PlayOutB, where you can, or the Hyperdeck emulator, PlayOutB, which runs on a Raspberry Pi, and that will also be able to play that podcast out. And then you can pretend like it's live. Hopefully that helps. Do you have a recommendation for a dedicated hardware encoder box that can multicast? I think there's a couple available on various websites. I haven't actually used one myself, so I'm not sure I would be able to recommend one yet. But I know there's a couple of them. Some of them aren't even very expensive. They're like usually in the $200 to $300 range. And I'm pretty sure I've seen multi-streaming available, like advertised on a couple of them. So if you search for HDMI or H264 encoder, I think that's how you'll find a bunch of them on Amazon or AliExpress or whatever. Okay. Can you take multi-view out to the Raspberry Pi and extract the program window to go to a confidence monitor? I suppose you could. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. If you're looking at the... So here's where it's going to get weird. If you're looking at the multi-view, out of the HDMI, if you run that into a capture card, you could capture just this corner, right? Like a quarter of it, capture that, and then re-output that over HDMI for a confidence monitor. It's a little weird because it would scale it, right? It's going to end up scaling, like blowing it up. So you're going to get a bunch of, it's going to be lower resolution. It's going to be a quarter of the resolution of HD, which might be okay for a confidence monitor because it's going to be pretty far away anyway. Interesting idea. Interesting idea. I assume this was about when we were talking about remote call-in workflows because, yeah. So my thought with remote guests using a streaming bridge is to have some separate device for the call, separate from what's being mixed in the video. We'll see. Yeah, I noticed this too. The file management, trying to find the right place to name the files. But yeah, that the project is written assuming the right file names in there. So I think, yeah, it's awkward. I agree. I don't have a solution. The file names are hard to read because of the length of the names if they are long. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen any long file names. They all seem to be just like a couple words at most. iOS 14 has a bug with the CTEK ATEM 156. Output is fine, but the input from CTEK to the ATEM shows rolling and static. That's bizarre. I wonder what's going on. I wonder if it's some sort of HDCP thing. That's super weird. All right. Where else? Where was I? Joe. Hi, Joe. If you consider having guests call you in Zoom and use one mini for that and send your signal out for a streaming bridge to grab latency closer for the second Pro ingesting. This is, yeah, this is, it definitely gets tricky because you have to deal with the audio chain too. So I don't know. I'm still going to be thinking this through. So I'm happy to try it out with you though. So we should test that out. We're going to distribute the multi-view to all camera operators and presenters. Yeah, I think the was that about the, oh, for the conference monitor. I will say I have noticed that sending the multi-view to the talent can be confusing to them because they are not always trained to recognize what the program is, like what's on the main feed. So you have to tell them like the top right corner is what's live right now. Ignore the top left corner. So, and it can be kind of distracting if like you're doing things with the other inputs while they're live. So if people are fine with that, if they're fine with that, it's absolutely fine. Like if they're experienced, but I've noticed that some people tend to get a little bit confused about like knowing what is in the program by recognizing the top right corner as the program feed. The sound asks, what program are you using to display comments on the screen? So I see a bunch more people have joined since we started, which means you probably missed that earlier, but this is actually a browser extension that I just packaged up, and I will drop a link to it again in the chat. And I'm publishing a tutorial about this week, so feel free to just ignore this until then. But I will walk through in the tutorial how to install that and how to configure the key in the ATEM to show that. But totally works. Totally works great. And now that it doesn't require a bunch of fiddling with code, I don't actually mind pointing people to that solution anymore. My ATEM Mini Pro froze last time I streamed. Can't recall the exact details due to slight panic. Yeah, that's how that works. Image froze, soundbar froze, video buffered. That's bad. It sounds like you just got a weird crash. Bummer. Yeah, this hardware stuff usually crashes less often than a computer, but it is still code running somewhere, so it is still possible that there are bugs. Oh, darn. It's not, the little HDMI player is not available in Germany. That's too bad. All right, where was I? In the chat. Multi-view conference monitor confusion solved with a cardboard mask. That is a good point. That would absolutely work. Low tech. I love it. I know your code is set up for YouTube, but would like to get your code working for Zoom, showing the map. So actually, that map has nothing to do with YouTube. I lied. It's using the YouTube API. Oh, I see, the chat. Okay, yes. Back up. I need a little sound effect for the rewind. Yes, if you are trying to pull comments out of Zoom, you need to use the Zoom API. There is one. So it's definitely doable. And I've never actually tried using it before, but it should be totally possible. I know there is a list chat messages. Yeah, there's totally an API for the chat. So you can, or no, that's chat channels. Anyway, we have to figure out, there's an API for this in here somewhere. Looks doable. That'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting one to make that work on Zoom. Okay, this is something I've heard now quite a lot. USB-C output through Zoom after like 40 minutes starts getting delayed. And I've heard this a number of times now. And I'm pretty sure I heard that they're working on a solution for it, and I can't remember if they shipped that solution in the last firmware update or if it's coming in the next one. But the good news is they're aware of the problem. So hopefully it'll get sorted out soon. What's your experience in pushing the program out from the HDMI to computer monitors? I've discovered the ATEM Mini's output is YUV and not RGB. I am going into right now I'm going into a Feelworld camera monitor, which is then feeding a computer monitor. But I'm pretty sure that I can feed the computer monitor directly, this computer monitor directly from my ATEM Mini. I have had some monitors, the smaller ones, tend to not work, and I think I've tracked it down, not to the color, but to a frame rate issue. And I've noticed that when I first plug in the ATEM Mini into my camera monitor, it'll start at 30 hertz, and then it will negotiate up to 60. And the camera monitor handles that just fine. It'll show the picture at 30. It actually shows me 30 hertz on the screen. And then it goes black for a sec and then comes back at 60. And at that point, it passes through to the computer monitor over here. So this one's a computer monitor. It's a Dell 24-inch. Should I just try this? What could possibly go wrong? If I yank out my multi-view, okay, so that's now I can't see if I'm still alive. I hope this is still working. This is my computer, this is my multi-view in, and then all right, I don't want it, that's the one I want to keep. I want to feed my computer monitor with the multi-view. So this one, I'm pretty sure this one works. Cross your fingers. And it's doing something. No. I could have sworn this one worked. So I haven't seen this problem before where the monitor looks like it's recognized the signal. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but it's not off. It's like showing me black. It's rather than being off. I have never seen that before. So I guess that's funny because I wasn't using it with this little monitor before. I thought I just added that for fun. I could have sworn I've been using it with, oh, it could be my frame rate because this is set to 2997. Yeah, I think it's the same. I think it's the frame rate problem again. I think it's because my ATEM is 2997 and the monitor expects 60. And once this thing kicks into 60, that's when it shows up here. Let me do that again. So if I take this out, then watch. This one's going to turn on first, and you're going to see, you won't be able to see because it's so small, but it'll say 30. So plug that in. It says 30. You can see it. Oh, that one showed 30. Oh, I'm running it through the HDMI transmitter too, which is probably converting it. I have too many things going on. Anyway, that was a fun little experiment. So yeah, I think it's a frame rate issue. I could do it on my second one, try that, switch that to 60, but I think we're done experimenting with this for now. So Okay. Yeah. Turns out that desktop monitors don't like 30 frames a second, 30 hertz. This is exactly what this monitor is for. I'm not using it that way right now. I'm just using it as a regular monitor, but this is the CTEK ATEM 156, which is made for exactly this purpose. And it has 4 ins, 4 outs. I'll drop a link to that in the chat. It is a very cool little monitor. 4 HDMI monitor. I did a video about this too, so you can search my channel and you can take a look at that video. Problem is the HDCP coming out of iOS devices, the CTEK will not pass the HDMI through. So you need a splitter to strip the HDCP first. Yeah, I feel like there's this problem with HDCP where if a device doesn't support it, if it advertises that it does not support it, then the phone or a computer will not send an HDCP signal and everything's fine. It'll only not work with things like the Chromecast, which only outputs HDCP. If the device says it accepts HDCP, but then won't output that, then it breaks. And that's like, I've seen this in a couple of different devices and it's really frustrating. All right. Oh, hey. Tommy, good to see you here. Got a bug bite on the tip of my nose this morning. Was totally going to film something. I think that's what makeup is for. That is what makeup is for. I need to up my makeup game, actually. All right. Where was I? In the chat. Let's see. No slider for me today, Tommy, but I'm going to bring that back at some point. Tommy's been doing live streams and his B-cam shot is on a slider, so it's this nice little panning motion. But I didn't have mine set up today when I got in this morning. This is a very good point. OBS can do this. So you can capture the top right corner of the multi-view and then output from OBS to another computer. You could do it with like FFmpeg on the Raspberry Pi 2, but the OBS is probably a lot easier to deal with. Is the experiment with the CTEK with mixed resolutions and frame rates coming? Yes. So the reason that I haven't done it yet is because I have been working on my encoder test clips, which, let me see if I have one on a card to show. But I've been needing to finish all my encoder clips to actually, why is that not, no signal card 1, okay. I don't know why my Hyperdeck is not, I think I'm just not labeling my cards properly, so they're not, I don't know what's on them. But yeah, I showed this in the last week's stream, where I've got this little video clip which does a bunch of stuff, including having a frame counter across the bottom and different things. And I'm going to use this to test that monitor. So I had to finish this first. And I've got this created in a bunch of different frame rates, right? So we've got like all these different frame rates, which means I can now, if I can get enough devices together to push clips where I know the frame rates, push that out to the monitor and then actually test. So that is what I was waiting for. I was waiting to finish that project. Now that's done. By the way, if you do want to use that yourself, I am selling these clips because it was a lot of work, and that is now available to you as well. So drop a link to that in the chat. Tommy says, nerd speak incoming. FFmpeg, I wrote a video transcoder on AWS Lambda, resize and add watermark to 1080p. Saved 99% against AWS Elastic Transcoder. That's fascinating. That's cool. Okay. Yeah. Nerd speak incoming. Fair enough. How did I end up with myself in the corner on this view? I didn't mean to do that. That's cool. Yeah, FFmpeg can do anything. Basically, if you have a question about like, can you do this with video? The answer is yes, you can use FFmpeg. All right. There's a lot of people talking to each other in the chat, which is great, helping each other out. If you want to continue that, go over to the forums where you can actually continue this conversation after the live stream ends. The forums being forum.livevideotech.today. And that is a great place to continue answering questions. There's a lot of good stuff on there, including Share Your Rigs, which is a very fun category to follow, where you can see what people are using for their various setups and in their live events. It's a lot of fun. So go post a picture of your rig in there. It's great. You'll get a lot of comments about how cool it is, and then you can help other people as well. I want to bring in some people into this stream for testing out remote interview workflows using various things. So try one with a streaming bridge from somebody who has an ATEM Mini Pro. I want to try one using Ecamm Live. So if you do post a picture of your rigs and describe it in that category, I'm going to start going through that category, looking for guests to bring on. So definitely take a look at that. Where do you plug in the Chromecast? I have the HDMI splitter and I want to try it, how I use the Chromecast. Basically, the Chromecast, if you try to plug it into the ATEM, it doesn't work. You need the splitter between it, and it doesn't need power. At least the one I have doesn't need power. So Chromecast into the splitter into the ATEM. It just removes the HDCP so that the Chromecast can show the comments like I'm doing here. But you can also do it without a Chromecast. You can just plug in an extra HDMI out from your computer, and it'll show up like a monitor on the ATEM will show up like a monitor on your computer. All right. I'm going to your forums now and dropping a huge list of lights for sale. Good. Do it. Tommy is the lighting guy. So he's got a bunch of good, very excellent lights for sale because he reviews lights, and definitely going to be some good deals there. So you'll want to take a look at that for sure. All right, I am wrapping up here. I can't listen to myself, but I want to turn up the music. I need to figure out how to do that. How can I listen to myself on a delay while also monitoring the music? That is my question for myself. Do you recommend inputting the sound of the stream to the PC line in or ATEM Mini mic? I like using the ATEM Mini mic for stuff. Just keeps it out of the computer. Awesome. Ecamm and the ATEM Mini? Cool. Well, that'll be a fun series of shows, I think. And I don't have like a set schedule for that yet, but we'll figure something out. I'll be coordinating that on the forums at the very least. So with that said, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to... Oh, last thing I wanted to mention. If you did not get a notification via email and you were signed up, it's because your email thinks it was spam, and it's very hard to fight that. So I made one more way you can get notified about these streams, which is to subscribe to this feed in your calendar. So if you have a like Apple Calendar or any calendar app, you can go add this iCal feed to your calendar. And that will create an event on your calendar with the next stream. Speaking of the next stream, I need to go turn it on because I have it already scheduled, and I want to enable, I want that to show up in the calendar. So go ahead and, there we go, now it's public. Subscribe to that feed for updates, and hopefully you won't miss the next one. It'll be the same time next week. But thank you all for joining, and with that, I am going to say goodbye, wrap it up for now. Say goodnight to all the folks from Europe. Thanks for joining, and for whoever was joining from New Zealand, thank you for joining, and either get some sleep or good morning, depending on which end of that you were on. All right, thank you all, and see you next week.